afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I am Glenda Du Bois, and I am the State Director for AARP Kansas. And we're so excited and pleased to have with us our Secretary of State, Scott Schwab, who's here today. And we will be talking about the new districts that exist now after some of the laws have been passed. We're wanting to really get our voters in Kansas up to date on how to vote, where to vote, and when to vote. So thank you so much, Secretary Schwab, for joining us.
Honored to be here. Thank you.
All right. So we will just get started. We have a few questions we will entertain, and we will just share this great information to our audience.
Yeah.
So the first question we really want to just ask about the new redistricting information. We'd like to know, how do the maps that have new affect Kansas voters?
Well, that's a wonderful question. So this happens every 10 years because according to the U.S. Constitution, you do a census, and districts that are based, whether it's legislature, the state school board, or the U.S. House, is based on population. So it's one person, one representative, or one person, one vote. And the way this works is who was your member of Congress, or who was your state school board member, or who was a legislator of yours, is going to change potentially. In Western Kansas, as we have Eastern migration, there are districts in the West that are being combined. And then there's districts in the East that are going to get smaller, and new districts will pop up. So, for example, I live in Overland Park. The state House member I have today, after this election, it'll be a new person, even though they're not running against my current legislator. So you may see a new name. It's like, well, where's my friend so-and-so? Well, your friend so-and-so's district changed, and now you get to have a new friend so-and-so.
Absolutely. Very good. So that's one way that those things will happen. And so tell us then, when are these new maps and the new friends that we will be voting for now, when will that become effective?
So your current state representative, your current Congress member, your current state school board member, they're all going to stay the same until July or January of next year. But that said, your state House member of Congress, and state school board members, it may be a new person on the ballot, and then they will get sworn in. So while you have one person as a member of the legislature, you may be having to elect a different person. Here's where it gets a little confusing. Okay. The state Senate is not up for election this year. That'll be in 2 years. So you'll get to go through this again, and we'll be more than happy to explain it again in 2 years, that in 2 years, those Senate districts will then, for the campaign, will change. And then when they're sworn in, those new districts will actually take effect.
Okay. All right. So when that happens, how do I then know what my new district is and what's changed? And even these, now you're saying, would be candidates for the House or in the local elections. How do I know who those candidates are? How will I find that out?
That's a great question. So one of the things you can do, if you just want to see the maps, you can go and I'm going to say this slowly. So if folks have a pen and paper, if you don't, go ahead and get one. And it's KSLEG, L-E-G, research.org. I know that's kind of hard. So you can also go to our website. Yeah. Our website is sos.ks.gov. If you click on the elections tab, you can find the information there. And really a good way, especially in our more rural counties, you can, on that elections tab, you can see your county election office, and they can give you a sample ballot of who you'll be able to vote for coming up this August 2nd.
Okay. All right. Well, you've also shared with us how these redistricting maps and the redistricting in general takes place. So thank you so much for really going through that explanation. So as Secretary of State, tell us a little bit more about your role and what the role of the Secretary of State is in the midst of all of this.
Yeah, so it all begins with the census, which was 2020, which was a very difficult year to do the census because the pandemic shutdowns. And normally we do door to door, and we work with a committee with the governor's office to really try to do a good job counting Kansas citizens, because it affects more than just redistricting, federal funding, and other things. We weren't able to do as good of a job as we wanted to. And also we get the numbers back so late last year. We were expecting to get them in March of last year, and we got them in October. Here's what we were able to do to really help. One, we are the official receiving office for the census numbers, and then we provide those to the legislature and the governor so that they can use that for budget purposes, redistricting purposes, and other things. So, but what we used to do is we would take only state, we couldn't do it for congressional, but for state offices, we would call everybody, college kids and military members, and say, where do you want to be counted? Where you live now or where you were living before? And we would adjust those numbers. And we passed a constitutional amendment in 2019 to say, no, the numbers are the numbers. And here's why that was good, because we didn't know a pandemic was coming. Right. But in 2020, getting those numbers so late, we still may not have had those adjusted numbers out. So at least it would prevented a constitutional crisis. And we kind of, as opposed to getting more involved, we passed a constitutional amendment to get less involved so that your voters can know quicker who their state representative is going to be and who their members of Congress are going to be.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for clarifying that. So now, does one need to register or re-register to vote if they live in a new district now because of all of the redistricting that you've talked about?
And that's a fair concern, but no. So this is why, I saw a sign once in Kansas says, what's easier than registering to vote? And then there was nothing underneath it because there's nothing easier than registering to vote. If you're registered to vote and your name has not changed and your address has not changed, you don't have to change a thing. The lines will move around you. You're not moving to the lines. So it's accommodating the voters, which I really appreciate the way Kansas does it, because we don't want voters confused. We want the way you vote today is the same way you voted 2 years ago or last year in the local elections. But really, you just need to register to vote. And the deadline on that is coming up in July. It's July 12th. Yes. And if you have grandkids or kids that are 17, but they'll be 18 by August 2nd, go ahead and have them register to vote. That's legal, because that way they can vote in the August primary. But if they wait till they're 18 because their birthday's after that July 12th deadline, they're not going to be able to vote. And we want them to vote.
They will have missed a year.
Yeah, or they'll have to wait till the November election.
Absolutely. Well, yes, for sure. So the other thing is, we know that precinct leaders are important in this process also. So how will this redistricting impact precinct leaders? Will they change, or how will they be impacted?
Yeah, this is probably the most frustrating part of this process, especially for our 105 county election clerks. The lines were changed in statute, and so a lot of precincts were added, and there's a lot of precincts where nobody lives in them. And then the numbering of the precincts was a little bit messed up in statute. Not my fault. Is legislature. But that being said, if you're a precinct leader or you want to be a precinct leader, make sure you're visiting with your county clerk and engage that county election office. Again, and our website is sos.ks.gov. Find them under the elections tab, because your precinct may have been cut in two or combined or completely changed around. And that's the most confusing part of all this is precinct leaders. So I'm going to encourage you to talk to your county leaders for your party and make sure you're also engaging that county office.
All right. So now you mentioned the deadlines. So those they're set. So is there any other concern that we would have about the redistricting, as if they might impact the deadlines at all?
No. So we were proactive in the legislature. So the June 1st was a filing deadline for anybody who held a statewide office. That would include me as Secretary of State, the governor, lieutenant governor, treasurer, insurance commissioner, and U.S. Senate. Any other office that was affected by redistricting, that filing deadline was noon today. So now the stage is set for the election. You can go again to the elections tab at our website, sos.ks.gov, and you can see who's filed for office there. And you can look, some of those names you may recognize are the address, because communities know the area around them. But that stage is set. It's done. No other deadlines change.
Okay. All right. There was a question in the chat, and so if we could see that question again, we can certainly ask that. The other thing that you've given the information about how people can vote and where they can go to your website and get that information about the deadlines. I'd also, would you like to just share that again, or anything else that you want to share about that?
Yeah, and I encourage folks really, because a lot of these offices, except for U.S. Congress, obviously that's a lot bigger districts, But these legislative districts, especially in your metro areas, can be really, really small. And your neighbor across the street could be in a different district than you. So again, our website is sos.ks.gov. And I would encourage you can find your county and who that election officer is and reach out to that local official on all your questions. And I'm going to brag a little bit here. We have 105 county election clerks in the state, and they are wonderful people. They bleed red, white, and blue. They're nonpartisan, and they really want to help voters have the opportunity to make an educated vote. And so that's really the best place. And I know sometimes you just don't know who your county clerk is. Now, a lot of times in rural areas, they obviously do, because smaller communities, it's easy to know everybody in the county.
Neighbor.
Yeah, your neighbors. You see them at the grocery store and the local diner all the time. But that being said, go to our website, sos.ks.gov, elections tab, and you click on county offices, and it's really a drop-down menu, and it'll give you all the information. You can email, call, or just run by the office.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And I think that the question might have been around with the redistricting that has occurred, and we're looking at the legislature coming up. How then do you think that might change the landscape, perhaps, of the legislature?
Well, it's early to tell. And this is where candidates define themselves and they define each other. Sure. The national conversation, the more and more with the internet, social media, and more access to cable news networks, plays a lot in the local elections. And I'm learning more and more that political winds can turn quickly. And I remember just when George W. Bush was running, he had George H.W. Bush was running, he had 92% approval rating after the first Gulf War. Within a year, with inflation and in the Clean Air Act and a tax increase, he was losing to Bill Clinton. So he went from 92 down to the 40s. Just the national conversation, we can change the way these things go back and forth. It's not necessarily just the population in that district, but really it's issues.
It's issues, and it definitely is issues. And so we also know that the redistricting affects even the voting and the elections from the local level all the way up, and especially to the state level. So absolutely. Correct.
Absolutely. And the other thing that a lot of voters have is they have an organization they're a member of, whether it's, the ACLU, AARP, whether it's social issue groups or whatnot. You can also contact them. They're always good. I always hate the word, well, it's special interest. Well, everybody has a special interest. That's okay. But if you have an interest in an issue that's important to you, go out to the organizations that represent those issues on your side and get educated about it.
Well, the one thing that you really leads into the fact that AARP Kansas is certainly very much involved in voter engagement and voter education. And so you'll see on our website on the screen now, aarp.org/ksvotes. And that, if you go to that website, you will find the same basic information that you've talked about, because our goal is to make sure that the Kansans know how, when, and how to vote, and then vote. And then they can also just text KS Votes to 22777, and that will also provide that very same information for them, that you mentioned, because it's really about voter education and being sure that people know how to vote, when to vote, and where to vote, and then take that action. The call to action is to vote. So absolutely. So Secretary Schwab, thank you so very much for your time today, for being with us. This is just the second of this conversation. We'll have more conversations and more information regarding making sure that people in Kansas know how, where, when, and how to vote.
Absolutely. And one last thing, and I always like to say this, if you're a poll worker, thank you for being a poll worker.
Absolutely.
If you're not, please consider it. And here's the other thing. If you got kids or grandkids that are as young as 16, they can be poll workers too. And we love the teenagers involved in the election space because, one, they're becoming more electronically driven and they understand technology. And two, it looks great on an application for scholarships when they're heading off to school. So if you got grandkids or kids that are 16, 17, or 18, please encourage them to be poll workers. It's a really good experience for them.
Absolutely, it is. And it's such a good exercise for that intergenerational.
Yes, it is. It's fantastic.
Generational work. So
you get the bookends of our current generations that are here with us today.
That will move us all forward.
Yep.
So thank you so much, Secretary Schwab. You have a good rest of your day and a good weekend.
And you too. Enjoy this weather.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for joining in, and we will see you the next time. Goodbye.